Most of us have a complicated relationship with money. Not complicated in the way that economists talk about interest rates, market volatility, debt to income ratios. Complicated in the way that feels personal. The kind of complicated where you open your banking app and immediately feel a tightening in your chest, even before you see the number. The kind where you promise yourself, again, that this month will be different, and then it isn't. I lived in that cycle for a long time. Not because I was reckless, not because I didn't care, but because every system I tried felt like a punishment. Every budget app felt like a courtroom. Every financial advice article felt like it was written for someone with a completely different life than mine. And then I discovered something. Not a new app, not a productivity framework, not a 21-day spending fast. I discovered the way ordinary Japanese families, not wealthy families, not minimalist influencers, but regular working families have been managing their relationship with money for over a century. And what struck me most was this. It didn't feel like discipline. It felt like care. It felt like attention. It felt like the difference between racing through a meal and actually tasting it. There are 8 rituals that completely changed my financial life. And what I want to share with you today goes far beyond budgeting. Each of these rituals is a way of seeing, not just your money, but yourself. Let's begin. There is a concept at the heart of Japanese financial culture that doesn't have a direct translation in English. The closest I can get is this: the idea that money is not something you chase, manage, or fight against. Money is something you have a relationship with, and like any relationship, it responds to how much attention you give it, how honest you are with it, how present you are when you're with it. This isn't spiritual bypass. This isn't wishful thinking. It is, actually, the foundation of one of the most financially stable cultures in the modern world. Japan consistently ranks among the highest savings rates of any developed nation, averaging around 17% of household income saved annually, compared to roughly 4 to 5% in the United States. And the families driving those numbers aren't wealthy. They're ordinary. What's different is the ritual. Because here's the thing. A ritual is different from a habit. A habit is something you repeat. A ritual is something you do with intention. You can develop the habit of brushing your teeth without ever being present for it, but a ritual, even if it takes 90 seconds, requires you to show up. And showing up, it turns out, is the single most powerful financial act most of us never practice. These are the 8 rituals that changed everything for me. Ritual 1. The weekly money conversation with yourself. In many traditional Japanese households, there is a practice that happens at the end of every week. Not a full accounting, not a spreadsheet audit. Just a quiet moment, often 10 to 15 minutes on a Sunday evening, where a person sits with their finances and asks 3 questions. How did I spend this week? Was that how I intended to spend? What do I want to do differently next week? That's it. 3 questions. No judgment attached. No punishment for answers you don't like. Think about the last time you actually sat down and asked yourself those 3 questions without immediately feeling guilt, shame, or the urge to close the browser tab. For most of us, looking at our finances feels like looking at a report card we already know is bad, so we avoid it. And what we avoid grows in the dark. The Japanese approach to this weekly review is fundamentally different from the Western one. It isn't about catching yourself doing something wrong. It's like checking in with a garden, not because something is dying, but because growing things require regular attention. You look at the garden to understand it, not to judge it. What this does, neurologically, is remarkable. A 2019 study from the Journal of Consumer Research found that people who conducted brief weekly financial reviews, even 10 minutes, made 23% fewer impulsive purchases in the following week. Not because they were more disciplined, because awareness itself changes behavior. When we know we'll be looking at something, we start noticing it in real time. Try this. This Sunday evening, set a timer for 12 minutes. Open your bank account. Ask yourself the 3 questions. Write the answers in any notebook you already own. Don't add solutions yet, just answer. Ritual 2. The pause before every non-essential purchase. In Japan, there is a long-standing cultural attitude toward consumption that has no single name but shows up consistently across generations. It is the practice of pausing before acquiring something, not to deny yourself, but to genuinely ask, do I want this, or do I want the feeling this promises to give me? The distinction sounds small. It isn't. Think about the last time you added something to an online cart. The moment you clicked Add to Cart, there was a feeling, a small lift, a tiny sense of satisfaction. And here's what the research shows, and what the Japanese understood intuitively for decades before neuroscience caught up. That lift is the reward, not the item, the click, the addition, the sense of having decided. Many of us complete the purchase almost as an afterthought to a reward we already collected. It's like having a conversation where you've already decided what you think before the other person finishes speaking. The decision was never really about the information. It was about the feeling of deciding. The Japanese version of this practice is beautifully simple. Before any non-essential purchase, you wait. Not forever, The traditional approach used by many Japanese families is 24 hours for purchases under a certain threshold, typically around $30, and 72 hours for anything above that. During that pause, you don't research the product more. You don't read more reviews. You let the impulse sit. You watch what happens to it. What you'll discover is this: about 70% of the time, the desire dissolves on its own. Not because you suppressed it, but because it was never really a desire for the thing. It was a desire for relief, from boredom, from stress, from the low-grade anxiety of a Tuesday afternoon. And when the anxiety passes, the need for its remedy passes with it. Try this. Next time you feel the urge to buy something that isn't food, fuel, or a bill, stop. Set a reminder on your phone for 24 hours from that moment. Come back then and see if you still want it. Don't force yourself to say no. Just wait and watch. Ritual 3. The Notebook That Knows Everything. In 1904, a Japanese journalist named Hani Motoko created a simple tracking system for women managing household finances. She published it in a women's education magazine called Jogaku Sekai, and within a decade, it had become a national institution. The system she created is called the Kakeibo, which translates, roughly, to household financial ledger. But that translation doesn't know justice. The Kakeibo is not a spreadsheet. It is not an app. It is a physical notebook in which you write by hand every purchase you make and why you made it. Not just the category, the why. Most budgeting systems track what. The Kakeibo tracks what and why, and that one additional word transforms the entire experience. Because here's the thing. When you have to write, with your own hand, that you spent $47 on a restaurant meal because you were stressed after a difficult conversation at work, something shifts. You are no longer a passive actor in your own financial life. You are a witness to it. And being witnessed, even by yourself, changes what you do next. This isn't about shame. The Kakeibo was designed explicitly without judgment as a value. Hani Motoko was a progressive thinker. She didn't want women to feel trapped by their finances. She wanted them to understand their finances, which is a completely different thing. Understanding something gives you power over it. Being judged by something only gives it power over you. The physical act of handwriting is also not incidental. Research from Princeton University found that people who take notes by hand retain information significantly better than those who type. Not because they capture more words, but because they process what they're writing as they write it. When you write a number by hand, you feel it differently than when it auto-populates in a cell. Try this. Buy any notebook. It doesn't need to be special. For 1 week, write down every purchase by hand, not just the amount, one sentence about why. At the end of the week, read those sentences back. Notice what you see. Now, if that third ritual already shifted something in how you think about your money, what comes next goes even deeper. Because we've been talking about actions, the next few rituals are about something less visible, something that lives below behavior, something the Japanese have understood for generations that most Western financial culture completely ignores. Ritual 4. Spending as an expression of values, not a reward for suffering. There is a widely held belief in modern consumer culture, so widely held that most of us don't even notice it, that spending money is a reward. You worked hard this week. You deserve this. You've been stressed. You've been disciplined. Now you get to spend. This framing is so common that it feels true. But let's look at what it actually says. It says that the normal state of your life is deprivation, and spending is the relief from it. It says that money's primary function is to rescue you from your own existence. And it says, subtly but powerfully, that you cannot feel good without spending something. Japanese financial philosophy holds an entirely different relationship between spending and identity. The question isn't, what do I deserve after everything I've been through? The question is, does this purchase reflect who I actually am? It's like the difference between eating because you're finally allowed to and eating because the food is genuinely worth savoring. One is relief, the other is choice. Only one of them actually satisfies you. This doesn't mean deprivation, it means precision. Japanese families who practice this form of intentional spending often report spending significantly less overall, but feeling significantly more satisfied with what they do spend. Because every purchase is a small declaration of identity, not a consolation prize, the shift is subtle but seismic. When you stop spending as reward and start spending as expression, impulsive purchases lose their function entirely. They were never about the things. They were about the feeling of finally being allowed to feel okay. And when you feel okay without them, you simply don't need them. Try this. Before your next discretionary purchase, ask one question. Not, can I afford this? But, is this who I am? You don't need to answer out loud. Just let the question sit there for a moment. Ritual 5. The envelope that contains possibility, not constraint. One of the oldest financial practices in Japanese household management is the use of physical envelopes to organize monthly spending, not digitally, physically. You take your cash, or a written note representing your cash, and you divide it into labeled envelopes at the beginning of each month. Groceries, transportation, entertainment, clothing. Each envelope has a number. That number represents what you decided calmly and in advance this category is worth to you this month. The Western version of this is called the envelope method, and it's been written about endlessly. But the Japanese version has a quality that most Western explanations miss entirely. The envelopes are not walls, they are containers, and the difference is everything. A wall says, you cannot go beyond this. A container says, this is the space you have, use it intentionally. There's no shame in reaching the edge of the container. The container was designed by you, for you, based on what you actually value. The envelope isn't a cage, it's a frame. And a frame, as any artist knows, doesn't limit the art. It gives the art a place to exist.
Think about a garden with no borders. Without edges, there is no garden, just wilderness.
The border isn't what makes the garden small, it's what makes the garden real. Japanese families who use envelope-based budgeting consistently report less end-of-month anxiety than those who use app-based tracking. Not because apps are inferior, but because the physical act of handling money, even just writing numbers on paper, creates a different kind of relationship with it. You feel money when it's physical. In a digital world where spending is frictionless and invisible, making money visible and tangible is itself a form of ritual. Try this. Take a piece of paper and draw 6 boxes. Label each one with a spending category in your life. Write a number in each box representing your intended monthly spending for that category. Don't calculate it perfectly, just write what feels right and honest. That's your first envelope budget. Ritual 6. The end-of-day receipt of gratitude. This is the ritual that surprised me the most, and the one I resisted the longest. In many Japanese households, particularly among older generations, there is a practice of reviewing the day's spending in the evening, not as an audit, but as an act of gratitude. You look at what money left your hands today, and you consider what it provided. The coffee that gave you a warm beginning to a cold morning, the bus fare that carried you safely to work, the groceries that will become dinner for people you love. The Western mind reads this and immediately thinks, that's just positive thinking. That's just making yourself feel better about spending money. And I understand that instinct because I had it too. But there's something more precise happening here. What this practice does is interrupt the unconscious relationship most of us have with spending, which is that spending is loss. Every time money leaves, something leaves with it. We feel diminished. And because we feel diminished, we reach for more purchases to restore the feeling of having, more things to compensate for the loss of money. It becomes a loop that never closes. The Japanese evening gratitude practice interrupts the loop, not by lying to yourself about what you spent, but by completing the transaction in your mind. The money went, and look at what came. When the exchange feels complete, when you genuinely receive something for what you gave, the loop closes. You don't need to recover anything. The exchange was fair. You can let it rest. It's like the difference between finishing a conversation feeling unresolved and finishing it feeling understood. The first keeps playing in your head. The second lets you sleep. Try this. Tonight, before you go to sleep, think of one thing money provided for you today. Just one. It doesn't need to be significant. It just needs to be real. Hold it for 10 seconds. That's the whole practice. What all of these rituals have in common is something that no budgeting app has ever been able to replicate. They make money personal. They treat financial life not as a system to be optimized, but as a relationship to be tended. And that distinction between optimization and care is, I believe, the most important thing the Japanese financial tradition has to offer the rest of the world. Ritual 7. The annual meeting with your future self. Once a year, in early January, many Japanese families sit down together, or alone if they live alone, and conduct what can only be described as a meeting with the future. They look at the year ahead and ask, what do we want this year to provide for us? Not financially, personally. What experiences do we want to have? What security do we want to feel? What matters to us, really, underneath everything, that money can either support or undermine? And then, from those answers, they work backward to money. What would our finances need to look like to make those things possible? How much would we need to save? What would we need to stop spending on, not because those things are bad, but because they cost us access to the things we actually care about? This is different, profoundly different, from setting a savings target. A savings target is a number. This is a vision. And the research on this is unambiguous. People who connect financial behavior to personal values are significantly more likely to maintain that behavior long-term than people who operate from rules, guilt, or abstract financial goals. It's like the difference between running because you're afraid of getting sick and running because you love the feeling of being in your body. One is fear-based, one is love-based. Fear is exhausting, love sustains. The annual meeting with your future self takes about 30 minutes. You need no special format, just a piece of paper and a quiet hour. The questions are simple. What do I want my life to feel like this time next year? What role do I want money to play in that life? What would I need to change starting this month to make that possible? Try this. Set aside 30 minutes before the end of this month, not next month, this month. Sit somewhere quiet. Write the answers to those 3 questions. Put the paper somewhere you'll see it, not as a reminder of your obligations, as a reminder of your direction. Ritual 8. Learning to receive, not just to accumulate. This last ritual is the hardest to explain because it has no step-by-step action attached to it. It's a shift in orientation, and it might be the most important of the 8. In Japanese culture, there is a deep understanding that the purpose of financial stability is not accumulation for its own sake. Money saved is not a trophy, it is preparation. Preparation for experiences you want to have, for the people you want to take care of, for the version of yourself 10 years from now who will either be grateful for what you did or quietly carrying the weight of what you didn't. But there is something subtle embedded in this understanding that most financial culture overlooks entirely. Saving is not the opposite of spending. Saving and spending, done with intention, are both acts of receiving. When you save, you receive security. When you spend with care, you receive what you genuinely need. The problem is never money itself. The problem is the relationship. Think about water. A river that flows is alive. A river that is dammed completely stagnates. A river that has no banks at all floods everything and nourishes nothing. What makes a river is the combination: direction, boundaries, and movement. Your financial life is the same. Hoarding everything stagnates. Spending everything floods.
What you're looking for is the flow. Enough direction to know where you're going, enough boundaries to keep you there, enough movement to make the whole thing feel alive. The Japanese understanding of this isn't about frugality for its own sake. It isn't about deprivation. It's about alignment. Money flows toward the things you value. The question every single ritual in this video is ultimately asking is the same. Do you know what you value? Try this. This week, when you make any financial decision, to spend or to save, ask yourself one word: why? Not to judge the answer, just to know it, because knowing it is the beginning of everything. We began this conversation talking about a tightening in the chest. That feeling when you open your banking app and something inside you braces for impact before you even see the number. These 8 rituals didn't remove that feeling for me overnight. Nothing does things overnight, and I wouldn't trust anything that promised otherwise. What they did, slowly and then all at once, was change the quality of my relationship with money. From adversarial to honest, from anxious to attentive, from something I avoided to something I could actually look at. And looking at something clearly is always, always the beginning of being able to change it. You don't need to adopt all 8 rituals this week. You don't need to be perfect at any of them. You just need to begin with the smallest one, the one that felt easiest, the one that made you think, yes, I could actually do that. The Japanese have a way of thinking about progress that I find deeply calming. They believe that a small improvement, made consistently, over a long period of time, will always outperform a dramatic effort made once and abandoned. Not because dramatic effort is wrong, but because consistency is the thing that actually compounds. You don't need to transform your financial life this week. You just need to take one step in the right direction today. What about you? Which of these 8 rituals felt most true to where you are right now? I'd love to know in the comments. Sometimes the ritual that resonates most is a quiet signal about what you're most ready to change. If this kind of content speaks to you, the slow approach, the cultural lens, the idea that a calmer life and a calmer wallet might be built from the same material, then this channel was made for you. We explore these ideas every week: Japanese systems, historical wisdom, and the small shifts that quietly add up to a completely different relationship with money, with time, and with the life you're actually living. If that's the kind of conversation you want to keep having, subscribing takes 1 second, and it means you won't miss what comes next. We'd love to have you here.